And we are live. We're going to try and watch my language on this one, which is exciting.
It is.
I think it is. How are you? How you doing?
Good. I've got 2 water bottles,
Yeah,
first of all. So make sure you stay hydrated, folks.
yeah.
And actually, I prepped by watching your very first podcast where you talked a little bit about your background
Oh
and
boy.
you didn't have any water. So
Nothing.
I have 2 bottles today for that reason. I wanted to make sure I was prepared.
Awesome. Do you want to introduce yourself, what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Gloria, and I am the principal owner and I guess co-managing partner of GloJoy Co., which is a construction company brand that has a couple different subsectors within it. 2 main ones, one focusing on construction management with real estate developers or building owners that are trying to do adaptive reuse projects. And that's kind of where I started my construction career, if you will, and my construction business. And here recently, kind of when you and I met and some of the social media gang
Yeah.
in 2021, I started a contracting business in north of New York. So it's an area called Westchester County.
Okay.
And we also work with some other folks in New Jersey and Connecticut. And we found that for some smaller projects, particularly on the interiors, we just were not, the quality wasn't there for
Mhm.
for the dollar. So I found an opportunity in a niche in a market, and I had some really good coaches who just said, just try it,
Totally.
So I just tried it. And that's kind of when I started ramping up some of the social media stuff and started to show myself doing drywall work, painting, sanding floors, all of the stuff. And I kind of came across some of you folks
Mhm.
up in Canada and, really all across the globe. I follow folks who mentor me and help me in Australia and, even right here in New York and Brooklyn. So it's amazing.
Australia is the next place I'm reaching out to.
Okay.
Apparently, there's a couple of guys over there doing drywall podcasts, and that we're basically what we're doing with this is building that community. Now, I also kind of am selfish and I'm talking to people like you because I want to, but the kind of the main reason for starting it was trying to get a little bit more of a community together.
Hmm.
And it sounds like they have one down there, and their work is immaculate down there too. It's almost like you don't realize it. I kind of feel like when someone says just go for it, they're just saying, if you want to put the effort in, you can do it, but they're not quite saying that. Um,
Hmm.
and I feel like, when you're a hustler, it doesn't matter where you point your ship, you're going to get there eventually. It's just a matter of how much time you're going to put into it and stuff like that. So I'm not shocked at all that everything took off for you.
Well, I mean, I would say we're still in baby stages on a couple of things. For example, I see you wearing the Tech Dry Tools
Mhm.
shirt, and shout out to Tech Dry Tools because shameless plug, everybody
That's what
loves
I
them.
wanted. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody loves them. And they also super supportive of newer folks or folks
Mhm.
who are just kind of not a part of, like you said, just the straight drywall community.
Yeah.
And truthfully, I was not planning on doing my own drywall work. Like many people,
Yeah.
I think, who start in this business, we find ourselves in order to meet deadlines or in order to, just meet budget, learning how to do some of the work ourselves. And when I started to see really the amount of time that guys would, jerk around on my company dollar,
Oh yeah.
I was like, well, I know from working in corporate construction what it takes to, tape up an entire room move on to the next one, come back, do the second coat,
Yeah.
then come in and do the corners. And, anyway, like I'm not an idiot. It was my point. And so once I started to realize that, and also knowing that we have such a huge shortage of laborers, you know, I had been a laborer at some point in my life. I come from a background in construction. I mean, my grandparents used to own a construction business. They did window treatments. My dad expanded that to awnings, screen
Yeah.
doors, all kinds of stuff. So they were in the supply side, which is why I am such a huge advocate of supporting people like Tech Dry Tools,
Hmm.
because that's a small business. It's made in America,
Yep.
and you get customer service directly from the owner.
It's usually Corey that'll probably talk to
Yeah.
you, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's usually Corey that's talking to you.
Yeah.
So, and that's pretty rare. And that's how I grew up. And my parents and my grandparents, my aunts and uncles grew businesses. My uncle was a builder. And for our family, it was always a side hustle.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, you've got like hustler in your blood. Wasn't your grandpa was a cab driver or something to begin with, wasn't he? That like had
He was a cab driver, and he also worked in the oil and gas industry,
yeah.
for Hess. He retired from Hess. He created a union
Yeah.
within Hess, so he was definitely heavy into the unions and very supportive of union labor. And we are an open shop, as they call it.
Okay.
So we are not strictly non-union or strictly union. We can do both. And the reason for that is because we are in New York State. And
Okay.
some projects are going to require us to hire a union, and I'm
Yeah.
okay with it. I'm
Is that
cool.
is that like a, I don't want to say zoning, but is that like a location thing or is it like a percentage thing? Or how do you usually come across that?
Um, it's no secret that the unions are heavily tied into politicians and politics,
Yeah, okay.
both here in Canada, I'm
Yeah.
sure, and even in the UK,
Yeah.
Australia, I've heard, also. So it really has to do with who owes who what debt. And then,
Yeah. Solid answer. Yeah.
yeah, the
Yeah.
unions are kind of guaranteed X number of job. Now the unions give back a lot to the community. I mean,
Yeah.
they train like the best of the best,
Hmm.
they're sticklers for safety, as far as being progressive towards creating an environment where women feel comfortable. I feel like the unions have done a
Hmm.
much better job than private.
Oh my God.
So I'm a
Yeah.
huge advocate of the unions. I
Yeah.
mean, I say what I say, but they get their jobs because they deserve their jobs,
Hmm.
and they earn their jobs, and they do give back quite a bit, in my opinion,
Yeah.
to the community. I know there's a huge backlash, like private versus union, and
Yeah. I
anyway, I'm just here to say that each has its pros and cons.
and it's so funny anytime that it gets brought up with me because so my papa, which would be like my mom's dad, which was kind of in the same kind of, I'm guessing, time realm
Hmm.
as him, uh was such an advocate for the union. And I think that was like before the union where people were
Hmm.
being mistreated, right? People
Oh
were
yeah.
being like you had to do unsafe stuff or you're fired.
Yep.
I think that part of the union is irreplaceable. I think just like anything else, people abuse everything.
Of
And
course.
I think that's the part of the union that gets talked about the most is the guys that are putting in half the effort and that kind of stuff. But that
Hmm.
I don't think that's really what it is when you take a good look at it. But I also say it would have done me a disservice. Like I always wanted to grind my face. Like let's go. Working crazy hours, you'll get 2 or 3 years experience in a year
It's
doing that.
not for everybody, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mentor a couple of young girls, and two of them are in the union, one of them is not.
Okay.
And like college is not for everybody.
Yeah.
The structure of a union, the structure of a corporate company is not going to be for everybody. For example, I grew up every summer going to my grandparents' house,
Hmm.
and that's I'm a third culture kid. So, typically that's what happens when you're a third culture kid. You get shipped back to the motherland so you can practice the language and also visit your family and your relatives that you haven't seen all year,
Yeah.
versus people who kind of like grow up in the same place. They see their relatives on a regular basis. So anyway, I used to get sent back to St. Croix, the Virgin Islands, and my grandmother had a store, and my grandfather, who worked at the oil refinery, still did the installs after work and on the weekends. So we had to, during the summer, either help grandma with inventory, go on estimates with her. We would go on installs with our grandfather. I still
Yeah.
remember having prickly fingers from putting together those chains that go underneath the blinds. Do you remember those?
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. With the little balls and you got to click
Yeah,
it
the little
together.
balls. Yeah, we were, and we still
That's
are. The business is
terrible.
still around, but we were a blinds subcontractor, and
Yeah.
literally all we sold for some time were those horizontal blinds and vertical blinds, and those were the only options. So
That's so funny.
yeah, so I mean, I always say, like, when people see me talking to customers or interacting with customers, I say I get that from my grandmother and my dad, 100%. And then the technical side of things, the being overly meticulous about things and petty about how all the finishes need to be level 5. I don't care if it's a commercial job,
Yeah.
whatever. I feel like that comes from my grandfather, and comes from just uh, being around also luxury spaces my whole life.
Hmm.
Although our family was blue collar, I was truly blessed to have been able to go to private school my whole life.
Good for you.
So, they worked really hard and had these jobs plus side hustle
Yeah.
or, whatever, so that we could get like the best of the best. And we were never encouraged to do this growing up. I
Is it
think, like many young girls and many millennials, I don't know what year you were born. I was born in 85 and proud.
86? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were encouraged to focus on technology,
Hmm.
hence the gaming board and all this stuff, right? We know how to build computers, we know how to code. Like, I mean, this is what we were pushed to do. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I thought I was going to go into tech, and software development, or, if anything, architecture, BIM, something of that nature. But
Yeah.
the thought of even just sitting here for this podcast for however long we have to record
Yeah.
on a chair is like, oh my God, I have to sit still for that long. So
You know, honestly, since I've started the podcast, this is the longest amount of stagnant sitting awake
right,
that I
right.
do all the time. I guess driving, but I mean, you got to drive. Um,
But this
yeah,
is
that.
like talking to buddies.
Oh, I love it.
And,
I love it. Yeah.
yeah, I love doing things like this. We're talking about the industry that everybody thinks sucks.
Yeah.
And truthfully, had we not all been pushed to tech, and maybe we would have done like more shop classes or things,
Yeah.
or people like me were coming into the junior highs and high schools and speaking, and talking about six-figure plus businesses that
Hmm.
they own, doing construction and working with their hands in mud all day and paint, they would be like, what? Sign me up,
Yeah.
right? Because the only reason I think a lot of us went to college and, were pushed to college is because it's what we were told we had to do in order to make a decent living.
Yeah.
And with the cost of living going up and, both man and woman having to work, or, man and man or woman and woman, so a two
Yeah. Yeah.
family household, to sustain just the bills and children and everything, it was always like, oh, you go to college first, and this construction stuff is like the dirty stuff for the dumb people.
Yeah.
Like, I remember, I remember, vividly the first time I got a LinkedIn message from one of my former banker friends.
Okay.
Okay. Literally, like, am I reading this right? You do construction now?
I sure do. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
It's
so
like,
funny.
and then the response, I was like, yeah, and I went through the backstory as to how I got into construction from like banking to construction, right?
Yeah.
With him. And he was like, well, isn't that like a major pay cut? Like, come back to the bank. And I was like, no, actually, I'm making about the same right now. And
Hmm.
next year, once I don't have to pay for a bunch of tools that I had to buy
Yeah.
and other things, I'm going to keep more in my pocket. And then the year after that, I'm going to be billing more. So then I'm going to keep more in my pocket. Like, there's a strategy behind this, which the bank taught me. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
You know?
It
um,
may have backfired, but thanks for teaching it. Yeah. I love it. Because yeah,
well,
usually they want you borrowing and they want you, paying for an education and then paying you back and things like that. It's so I find in construction that it's one of the only things that the effort you put into it equals what you get out of it. Some of these guys are doing 10,000 board feet houses a week, and they're, pulling in 5 or 6 grand a week, and they're a single person. That's a
mhm,
tremendous amount of money for somebody that kind of came from the island of misfit toys, right? Like that's to me, that's what construction is when you're like 18. It's just
mhm,
you don't know what you're gonna do, and I've got an able body, I guess.
mhm.
Um,
I
yeah,
agree.
yeah, it's pretty cool. Now, I also kind of get that I understand where it comes from, that no one wants to do construction because no one wants to be a laborer. Like the guy carrying bricks, you don't want to be doing that when you're 50, right? Like
No.
that is a tiresome job. But owning a brick making company or owning a masonry company, you'd absolutely want to do that when you're 50. And I don't think anybody looked at that side of the coin, right?
Mm-mm.
It was this thing that was going to hurt your back eventually. Yeah.
It just wasn't branded well, for lack of better term.
Yeah.
The construction industry has been misrepresented
Totally.
for so many decades. And we had this amazing boom during the Industrial Revolution where machines came in and started to take over some of the manual labor, but you still needed people to run the machines.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I tell people who, particularly all of those who have recently gotten laid off from the technology industry,
Mhm.
number one, you probably shouldn't have been posting day in the lives at whatever company you were at on TikTok while you should have been working.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of the main reasons you got canned. Because those, I mean, I do content, but for my company, but you'll never see people around me because I'm not doing it on
Yes.
company dollar with the clients and the workers there.
Right.
Safety is of utmost importance to me.
Hmm.
So filming while we have an active job site with a bunch of trades
Yeah.
for tech dry tools, not the right time, right? I do that later or
Hmm.
before people show up or on a break, whatever. That's number one. If I see people doing that on like my time,
Yeah.
I get a little PO'd, not gonna lie,
Well, yeah.
and I know that a lot of people out there right now are like a one-man band,
Yeah.
so it doesn't really matter. But like when you are trying to set an example also for others out there, it's really, really, really important, to respect, if you are working for a company as a
Hmm.
worker, respect the salary that you're getting paid, and maybe just ask for permission and say, hey, can I collab with you on this, and
Yes.
whatever. And then the other thing is I always tell them that there are so many transferable skills between technology and construction and
Totally.
technology are currently morphing a little bit, very similar to when in the Industrial Revolution,
Okay.
we had machinery taking over some of the, repetitive labor,
Yep.
that then the labor could then just operate the machine. Granted, some people, yes, are going to lose their jobs or going to be moved, hopefully, to something different. But that's kind of what's happening with technology right now. You have AI and
Yep.
other automation that is taking over some of the jobs that coders and, other people did. So a lot of the tech companies are becoming leaner, and all of the people, I feel like, who got shoved into tech
Hmm.
like us, no qualms on tech. I love tech, but we have to find something else.
Yeah.
And so I am heavily recruiting in the technology space. I really, really feel like that's the way that we can kind of help balance some of this. They're the same engineers, they're the
Hmm.
same people who like to tinker with things and, what have you. So hopefully we can, bring some people. This is another shameless plug. Bring some people over from technology. If you're
Yep.
applying for jobs, you're not getting any responses, I encourage you to apply for some of the bigger, larger corporate construction companies.
Hmm.
I really don't care if you come work for me, if you come work for Brawley's dad, if you go work for Corey on the supply side, or if
Yep.
you go to a union. Like, we just want more people to join the construction
Yeah.
industry,
Yeah.
you know?
There's going to be a big focus on that this year from me of just trying to wrap my head around when you're training people, they cost you money. And
Yeah.
your eyes just rolled right around. Yeah. So, and that's what I'm talking about. I want to figure out how to bridge that gap where it's like, I don't know if you get people to like fund programs that gets
Hmm.
gets kids started, and then
Hmm.
if they graduate the program, you'll give them a job, something like that. Oh, but the person running it would guarantee a skill set. You know what I mean? And there has to be a way because there's some crazy statistic. It's like 2035, there's like a three-quarters of a million people retiring in the trades that year.
Yeah, no,
It's going to be devastating.
yeah, the boomers are leaving, and they're picking up a lot of the like laziness
Hmm.
from some of the younger generation, where, rather than a smoke break, they got to take a TikTok break, or, they got to take a vaping break, or whatever the heck kind of
Yeah.
break they take. And they're very emotional, and like there's like a whole thing, right?
Oh yeah.
I feel like I sound like the boomers did when we were younger, like, oh, these kids, but the kids are really the
And
boomers.
their
Like,
music, yeah.
the kids are really the boomers. They're like the older guys that like don't want to train the newer generation,
Yeah.
that, want to like just be on site to be on site, and like not actually physically do any work because
Yeah.
they've been doing this for 40 years, and, they just need to wait until their pension clears. And I'm like, bro, like, you're still getting paid.
You
And I'm
you
talking
do.
on much larger jobs, right? Because like I mentioned before, we do a little bit of construction management for large commercial jobs, and then
Yep.
we have the little business, which is like me and like two or three helpers
Okay.
sometimes. And sometimes I have no helper. And I prefer it that way, honestly.
I love working alone. I know it
Yeah.
sounds terrible, but it's the
Well,
best.
to
You crank your music.
to loop back to your question about the training,
Yeah.
so I am training two people right now.
Great.
And I know one woman that I follow very closely. She literally just tagged me on a post. There's a program, she's in Canada. And so there's a program where like high school students get placed for internships
Okay.
with tradespeople.
Yeah. That's
Um,
exactly what needs to start happening. Yeah.
yeah, and I love that, right? So I told her to like tag me on this kid's journey so that I could like share it because I feel like people in the US need to see it.
Hmm.
And I would love to have a program like that. So I'm actually working with one of the young ladies I'm training
Perfect.
in project administration, but also like government contracting. I am working with her to, reach out to high schools, local high schools, and see if they want to do programs like that with us in the
Brilliant.
summer, or even like community colleges. I met a developer back in the day when Clubhouse was a thing, online. I don't know if you know what Clubhouse is. It's okay.
Okay.
Clubhouse is an audio app. It's what Twitter Spaces basically copied. So if
Okay.
you're familiar with Twitter Spaces, there was another app very similar to like how Vine
Yep.
predated, Snapchat and other things.
Right.
So it was just this app that was around during the pandemic. And so I met this developer anyway, looping back, not going to let my ADHD take over.
This is what happens on this podcast. Yeah,
I
it's
know.
okay though. It's all
Yeah.
right.
So, but it's an audio app, audio only. I grew a huge construction community there of, uh, 4,500 people or something like that. And I
Wow.
met this
Okay.
developer who actually was in a program where he went to juvie for being a bad kid.
Yep.
And they gave him an option. The second time he went to juvie, he could either go through this construction trades program,
Hmm.
you know, and like be an intern and like basically give community service or whatever it was. I have it like buried in my Instagram because I think it's cool too.
Yeah.
Or he could go to juvie and do time. And obviously the kid chose this construction thing. And now he's like an affordable housing developer across the
Yeah.
country. I mean, and he's like an inspiration to me, even like I want to develop massive 50, 100 unit buildings
Yep.
someday, but this is a guy who was set up to fail.
Yes.
And somebody created a not-for-profit in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who
Perfect.
decided that these kids need a second chance. And if they work with their hands, maybe some of them will get out of this.
Absolutely. A lot of those kids, they lack purpose. That's what a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it is. And they're not coming from a place where there's a lot of cheerleading going on. It's like, get out of here, go be quiet somewhere or whatever it is. And they get into trouble. It's not that the kids are bad, it's that they're they're lost. And
Oh, yeah.
when you get a judge or somebody that goes, listen, you're gonna go make something from of yourself or don't, but pick
Mm-hmm.
one today. And I think if they pick the wrong one, you go talk to them in 6 months. It's just like prison sucks. There's no way you wouldn't want to be swinging a hammer instead of being in there.
I mean, you
Um,
got to lash out your anger somehow. You might
right?
as well swing a hammer.
No kidding. Yeah, it's we do a co-op up here. I just had Girls Can Frame on, and that's how she got started framing. Like she's
Okay,
really
that's
young.
exactly what it's called. It's called a co-op.
Yeah, yeah, and
Um,
it's not paid, but they'll bring you in. And if they bring you in and you're worth half your weight, they hire you. If you
mhm.
if you want to. Some of these guys like they'll hire you out of high school. Like
Mhm.
if you don't want to finish, we're making money over here.
Yeah,
And
no, it's
I
true.
yeah, I never finished. It just wasn't for me. I got a taste for putting in a lot of effort and how much money you can make doing that, which was nothing back then, but you got a taste for it. And that did me really well. I know people that stuck around in schooling and did really well, and I know people that stuck around and they don't use it. And it just seems like a lot of wasted time sometimes.
Definitely didn't use it, and
Hmm.
I'm a highly spiritual human being. People who follow me, particularly on Instagram, know that. And I can tell you that I am truly blessed to have been by chance forced to drop out of college.
Hmm.
And basically it was because, the market crashed in 09, 08, 09, and my parents couldn't afford to continue to pay it. My scholarships didn't cover 100%. And the
Yeah.
school didn't really care about this brown curly haired Caribbean girl, you know, that had mediocre grades and never went to class. So,
Yeah.
you know, I think had I made an effort, maybe, but you know, they really didn't give a crap. And I think I'm truly blessed because otherwise I would have been stuck with all that debt. And to be fair, in all the certifications that I've done for construction, for safety, for, you know, just curiosity, because I love to learn,
Hmm.
um, I probably have done more hours learning on my own than I would
Totally.
have for college credits and continue to do so.
Yeah.
Like to go back to your programs, I recently got accepted into a program here in New York where it's like a street MBA program. Like
Okay.
they vet your business out. You have to have like a certain number of revenue. But one of the criteria is that you also need to be training, you know, and or mentoring
Okay.
young minority and or, you know, dis um disadvantaged
Yeah.
youth, right? And by chance, not because I wanted to get into a program, but just because I really like to help people, you know,
Mm.
I had been working with and mentoring some, you know, young folks, and some of them didn't stick around, and two
Yeah.
of them have. And, you know, when they're not in school or they're not working whatever 9 to 5 job they have, they come work with me and they work as a laborer. They learn. They always do different stuff, you
Hmm.
know. I have one guy who literally, like, he has had the same job since he graduated high school, and he works for one of the union shops. But when he's not got work or part-time, you know, he can come work with us. And every single time we have him working with somebody different and doing something totally different. And I have him like write back feedback,
Yeah.
right? Like, what did you learn today? What did you not like about today? You
Yeah.
know, because I also want to see where he fits best, you know. Maybe what he's doing now is not the path. And I see that with a lot of people where they start off in one area of construction and maybe they should be doing something else.
Yeah.
Like, I personally started off on the construction administration side of things. And as soon as somebody called in sick and I accidentally got sent in the field to go be a site super, there was
Yeah.
no turning back.
No. You get bit by that bug.
Yeah, there's no turning back.
Okay. I think that's a good time to take our first break.
All right, awesome. How do we do?